It's January 20th, and I'm invited to be in a television studio to comment on the inaugural address, which I had almost always, indeed had always done in the past. It was my favorite speech. It was the speech in which the candidate shed his candidate qualities and tries to assume presidential qualities. And I'm sitting in the studio waiting for the speech. No, it's a shout out. It's the campaign speech writ large. It's America first, he says, America first. And I said to myself, I better take a leave of absence from the presidency. So several people told me I should write a memoir. God, memoir. No, memoirs are written by generals in big wars. Memoirs are written by bit players.
The man who's known as Mr. Soundbite.
Should we introduce him first?
Oh, you got to do that.
Presidential Scholars, who's a senior fellow in governmental studies of the Brookings Institution.
And political analyst.
Author of many books.
Was on the White House staff of Dwight Eisenhower. He was only 13 at the time.
And this award-winning author has also had the privilege and distinction of writing 2 State of the Union addresses.
I want to start off by getting into conflict of interest. You know, you worked in the Nixon administration, and you did a little work for Jimmy Carter, and you have been a part of this whole corrupt and miserable system, so you have a vested interest in keeping this lousy system, like practically everybody else in this town. Isn't that correct?
For heaven's sakes, why would you say that? I haven't been in active politics in 20 years. Maybe if I had stayed in active politics and cared enough to do that, it would have been different.
Stephen Hess.
Stephen Hess.
Mr. Hess, we welcome you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
The most important couple words I wrote for Eisenhower was what became his last State of the Union message. Civil rights is a moral issue. He never said that before. Was to me important, and by far the most important thing I ever wrote for a president. I was actually offered a job in the Kennedy administration, which was very flattering, but I felt a young man can't just jump from one party to the other, so I turned that down. I had gone to California to be Richard Nixon's speechwriter when he ran for governor, a race that he should never have run and ultimately lost. Would I become the national chairman of the White House Conference on Children and Youth? And I think, what an awful job. Can you imagine being the chairman of a youth conference in the middle of the Vietnam War? Okay, the federal government made things so ugly. Why should we uglify things? I go and I pick the best person who does brands in the United States, Ivan Shamayev. The youth conference was going to be even trickier, but fortunately I had picked a large advisory group of young people. Their advice was very good. They just didn't want to talk to each other. They wanted to talk to important adults, business leaders, government leaders, judges as well.
Hello. Yes, sir. I wonder if you've been in touch with that youth conference out there. I talked to a congressman who'd been out there, and he said it was about 90% socialist, left-wing, Eastern liberal.
Oprah was there. She was there, 17 years old, from Tennessee. I didn't know that. Actually, I wrote her a letter. The only place I could write was her TV show, and I never got an answer.
They said they adopted a resolution to abolish the capitalist system.
I think that's right.
Yeah, no, he is right on that, because I saw it.
Of course, they wanted the war to end. So did the president, if he could have done it. They wanted marijuana as carefully defined by the government and so forth. They wanted a youth vote. Mondale set up a committee in Congress to consider their recommendations. I can't claim that they're responsible for all the things that happened, but they certainly became a force as much as a group of young people could be.
Well, I don't think Steve that was a good idea as a way to get Steve out of the White House.
This is enough of Hess now. Let's don't promise him anything more. Have we promised him anything more?
I certainly hope not to my knowledge.
Well, I'm not promising anything more. You know what I mean? He's done now. He's had his say, and let him go out and
Write
yak.
a book or something. Yeah.
Huh? Write his book, right?
When I got to Brookings, we were there to try to make government better. All of my books were ultimately on two areas, the presidency and the press, which became the media. I was suddenly a soundbite. I mean, journalists were coming to me and asking me about all of these people engaged in Watergate. This was very unattractive to Kermit Gordon, the head of Brookings, who had a communications staff of one, and I don't think he was very busy. I mean, we were not people who were supposed to be in the green room waiting to go on evening news programs.
Particularly on the president's part, there seemed to be an impugning of motives, a loss and a lack of trust, of respect. I think this can only be remembered in history as a very nasty day for America.
More and more people were watching me comment on all these atrocities that were happening, and it really affected me. I mean, I started to have nightmares. And in fact, I ultimately went on the air and said, this is my last day, I can't come back.
I don't think that many of these witnesses really understand what this country is all about, the differences and diversities and respect for each other that makes the country operate. I don't even like listening to myself talking about it. I sound like a moral prig. I'm mad at these people, and I sound mean, and I don't think of myself as a mean person. So tonight, as I leave you, I'm distressed and I'm burned out, and I salute you for performing a very useful, though distressing service, and I wish you fortitude and a strong stomach.
Nixon had been good to me and was an interesting person that I cared about, and suddenly I could not get over Watergate. Other people were getting over it one way or another. I could not forgive him. I did not go to his funeral. I've known presidents, but they've been complicated people, and that's how my future with Richard Nixon ended.
I'd like to think that this is a failure of men and not of the system. I'd like to think that we have a system that for 200 years hasn't produced a Watergate. I would suggest, on the other hand, that when only 55% of the people vote, and after all, voting is the most elemental and simple obligation of citizenship, well, there are politicians who are hearing that people aren't listening and hearing that people aren't watching, and they get the message.